In 1953, a UFO enthusiast organized a worldwide telepathic event. He was hoping he would make contact with these entities from another world. Well, a short time later, these three eerie men in black types showed up and they told him that he better stop immediately or there will be consequences. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever seen the movie Dark City with Kiefer Sutherland and Rufus Sewell? It's this wild tale about a city that's stuck in endless night, but nobody notices because these creepy beings, only referred to as the strangers, control everything, including the minds of the citizens.
Right, and if you haven't seen the movie, don't worry, we're not going to spoil it for you.
I only bring it up to give you this visual of the type of beings that a man named Al Bender claimed that he saw in the 1950s. He did something to attract the attention of these peculiar entities.
And that's what this report is about. But before Damon gets into this one, we wanted to give you a heads up about next week.
Yeah, you're going to want to set aside a little bit of extra time for that one.
Yeah, we'll be sharing two reports next week. One is about Lizzie Borden's distant bloody relatives and possible satanic rituals.
And with the other one, we actually traveled and we did a face-to-face interview with a detective about a murder that he was involved in, where a psychic helped to solve the case.
We actually interviewed two detectives and the psychic herself.
Yeah, so you're going to want to set aside, I would say, probably about 90 minutes for next week's report. Going back to Al Bender and these creepy men in black types, he said that in the 1950s, he did something to attract the attention of these peculiar entities. He kept detailed records of their interactions with him. He said that they visited him several times, showed him their base here on Earth, and even told him that God didn't exist. In this video, we're simply going to share with you Al Bender's story, and then we'll let you decide what really happened. So this report begins with the creation of an organization called the International Flying Saucer Bureau. Back in the 1940s and early 50s, UFO sightings exploded. Well, the government looked into this, but pretty much kept citizens in the dark. In April of 1952, a man named Al Bender launched the International Flying Saucer Bureau, welcoming all UFO enthusiasts. By mid-May, their first meeting was a hit, and soon chapters popped up all across the United States, the United Kingdom, and even as far away as Australia. But then, someone or something didn't like it, because Al Bender got this chilling phone call.
When I lifted the receiver, there was no one there. My head began to spin and ache. No voice answered when I spoke, but still I received a message, telepathically. I was told that I should not delve into the saucer mystery any further. As I listened to the phone, I heard a strange humming sound, and then suddenly, the noise was gone, and I got the usual dial tone.
This was Al Bender's first encounter with what would later become known as the Men in Black. And although he did take this voiceless phone call as a warning, he didn't quit. He continued to push his organization forward, and on October 1st, 1952, he released a publication called Space Review. This was a paper that was set to come out every quarter, and it was everything UFO. Well, about a week after that, as Bender was walking home from a late-night movie, he had an extremely bizarre encounter.
I suddenly developed a throbbing headache, and my ears blocked up. There was a blue flash, and then everything went dark. At the same time, I had the sensation that my feet had lifted from the ground. My head throbbed, and again, as when I had received this strange phone call, I had the strong impression that somebody was telling me to forget the IFSB. As suddenly as the feeling came, it left, and my head ceased to ache.
Not knowing what to think, Bender rushed home, went inside and locked the door. And then he breathed a sigh of relief, feeling that whatever he had just experienced was now outside and he was safe. But then he went upstairs. When he opened his bedroom door, he saw a large bright blue orb hovering in the center of the room. But when he switched on the light, it just kind of dissolved into nothingness. Well, as he was pondering this, he was hit with a sharp stench of burning sulfur. It stung his eyes so badly that he had to crack open a window, and as he was breathing in the fresh air, static crackling sounds came from behind him. His radio, which he knew that he had turned off before he left for the movies, was on and tuned to nothing. About a month later, with absolutely no intention of stopping his work with the IFSB, Bender had another strange experience. Once again, he had decided to go see a late-night movie. And you know that feeling that you get when you just know that someone is watching you?
I had this odd prickly sensation in the back of my neck, and I thought someone had his eyes on me. I looked around, but couldn't see anybody looking at me, and I began to fidget in my seat. Then suddenly, I felt the presence of someone in the seat next to me. I took a quick glance.
The man that Bender saw there in the theater didn't exactly look like one of the strangers from the movie Dark City. He would meet them a bit later. But this guy here, he certainly wasn't normal either, and he would have terrified me to death.
His eyes drew my attention. I turned my head facing him. Light was coming from his eyes. They burned right into me. Just then, I felt a spinning in my head, and the movie screen blurred. I blinked my eyes several times.
As he stared at the screen, he thought about it. Maybe the brightness in the guy's eyes was somehow a reflection from the movie. Well, after a moment, Bender couldn't resist, and he looked back. But the seat was empty. Spooky, right? Even though the guy wasn't there, Bender still felt his presence. So he looked around and he carefully scanned the auditorium. And eventually, he turned all the way around, and as he did, now check this out, he found the guy sitting in the seat directly behind him, staring at him with those bright eyes. So Bender jumped up, ran and told the manager, and then he left the building. As he was walking home, he had a strange sensation that he was being followed. So he stopped and looked around, and as he suspected, the guy from the theater was across the street staring at him. Well, Bender rushed to a policeman that was standing nearby. Then he pointed back at the man, but when the police officer looked, the man was gone. Well, this whole thing had just been another attempt to intimidate him, to get him to stop pushing his organization forward, something that he did not do. As a matter of fact, just the opposite, actually. Not long after this, Bender devised a way to contact these strange beings. Over the next few months, Bender and his IFSB officers crafted this bold telepathic experiment, hoping to contact these otherworldly beings directly. With members worldwide, Bender instructed everyone to get alone, relax, and then chant this specific phrase, focusing, of course, on connecting with these aliens. The experiment took place on March 15th at exactly 6 p.m. IFSB headquarters time. To avoid distractions, Bender dimmed the lights, switched off the radio, and then lay down on his bed.
I closed my eyes and began to repeat the message. It was after the third attempt that I felt a terrible cold chill hit my body. Then my head began to ache, and a strange odor reached my nostrils, like burning sulfur. Then the room began to fade away, and small blue lights seemed to swim through my brain. I suddenly felt like I was floating in the middle of space. The parts of my forehead directly over my eyes seemed to be puffed up. I felt very cold, as if I were lying naked on a piece of ice. Suddenly, I heard a voice, which permeated me, but wasn't exactly audible.
We have been watching you with your activities. Please be advised to discontinue delving into the mysteries of the universe. We will make an appearance if you disobey.
I replied in words, though my lips did not move. I asked them, "Why aren't you friendly to us?"
We have a special assigned time and must not be disturbed by immediately.
With this, the voice faded away, but I could sense that something was watching me. My body seemed to drop suddenly, and once again, I regained my senses and realized I was on my bed. The room was filled with yellow mist, Not far from my bed was the shadow of a man, but when I sat up, disappeared.
What in the world just happened? Had he fallen asleep and been dreaming? No, this was way too real. And then he noticed the radio. It was on and tuned to nothing. I started this report referencing the movie Dark City because that's how Al Bender described these beings. Well, it was one night in July of 1953 when they first entered his room and communicated with him face to face.
After I had brushed my teeth and returned to my bed, I sensed something wasn't right. Then I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, and my eyes began to water. Blue lights appeared from nowhere and swirled about the room. I grew dizzy as the areas above my eyes throbbed and again felt puffy. I felt my body grow icy cold. Then I saw 3 shadowy figures in the room. They floated about a foot off the floor. My temples throbbed and my body grew light. The 3 figures became clearer. All of them were dressed in black clothes, with long coats and black hats. Their faces were not clearly discernible, for the hats partly hid them. The eyes of all 3 figures suddenly lit up like flashlights. They burned into my soul as the pains above my eyes became almost unbearable. Then I got a telepathic message.
In his mind, Bender could feel their thoughts, and he was told that they had been watching him and they had determined that he was a good man. But his interest in UFOs could be dangerous. They told him that they had a base here on Earth, and there was a specific reason that they were here, and they were not going to be stopped until they were finished with their goal. Well, that sounds ominous to me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Then they gave him this small piece of metal. They told him to hold on to it, and they would be contacting him again in 2 days. As he was examining this piece of metal, one of them went over to the radio and turned it to its static station. Well, this of course got his attention, and he asked, "What's up with the radio? Why do you guys always turn it to static?" To which they said, "Well, it helps us facilitate our transportation." And with that, they were gone. What an experience, right? Well, waiting for time to pass was like waiting for eternity. Those 2 days passed excruciatingly slowly. But when the time approached, Bender retrieved the piece of metal, went to his bed, and waited.
I had hardly touched the bed when once again I could sense leaving my body. And looking back, I could see myself lying on the bed as I drifted away from it. Everything went dark, and I felt myself floating, as if on a cloud. How much time this floating consumed, I don't know, but it seemed like days. Then, a sudden jolt ended my floating, and all movement ceased. The darkness cleared, and I was surrounded by a very bright light. As my eyes grew accustomed to the brilliance, I began to make out my surroundings.
Bender found himself seated in a metal chair in a circular room. He said that he had the feeling like he was in a briefing room or maybe a lecture hall. He said that he could move comfortably in the chair, but he couldn't get up, so he just sat there and waited. And before long, a man, looking very much like those strangers from Dark City, floated into the room in front of him. Then this screen appeared, and this being communicated with him telepathically, telling him to pay attention to the screen. As he did, his experience completely changed, and it was as if he were no longer looking at the screen, but rather he was part of what was happening. Bender found himself rising higher and higher and then slowly pulling away from the Earth, heading out into outer space. Then the scene changed, and Bender was slowly moving forward, passing stars. An instant later, it was as if he were rapidly moving through a wormhole. Eventually, his focus zeroed in on another star on the other side of the galaxy, and then a planet within that star's system. He was told that he was looking at their planet, and their civilization was billions of years ahead ahead of humans. Unlike Earth, their world only had one race, and therefore there was no conflict. There were no divided nations, no wars, and everyone lived in peace. Bender was told that countless stars in the galaxy had a planet with intelligent life on it, and that in our solar system, Mars actually had life on it in the distant past. But another civilization, a malevolent civilization, came through our system and destroyed it. Then Bender was shown an image of Earth's oceans and was told that although their planet had plenty of water, their oceans lacked a certain chemical that Earth's oceans had, and they were here on Earth to extract this chemical and take it back to their planet. He was told that it wouldn't damage Earth in any way and their mission would be over soon enough. Well, the screen changed again, and this time it showed stockpiles of nuclear missiles here on Earth, the missiles that the USA had made and the missiles that the USSR had made. And then the being told Bender that if Earth interfered in any way, his race could and would send out a signal that would detonate all of these missiles all at the same time. He was told that they would only do it if Earth interfered in their mission. Still, that's a crazy threat, right? Then the scene changed once more, and Bender found himself standing in front of this hideous creature. It looked kind of like a half-man, half-dragon. Bender said that it stood about 10 foot tall, with this bright green body but a blood-red face. And get this, it had no nose or mouth, only eyes, and from the eyes, bright greenish-orange beams of light shot forward. Bender was told that this was how beings of their race appeared in their natural form, but they were able to take on a human appearance while they were here on Earth, and no one could tell the difference. Shortly after this, Bender found himself back in his room, sitting on his bed, holding that small piece of metal. He had learned a lot of things, but this experience, of course, had been completely a one-sided conversation. Just a month later, however, Bender would be brought back, and this time he would be able to ask questions. The first time that the beings came and took Bender, he had the feeling that they had taken him aboard their ship, which was not far from his house. But in August of 1953, they returned, and this time he felt as if they had taken him much further away. He was alone in his room when they arrived.
They approached and formed a circle around me. They actually touched me. They placed their hands on my shoulders, and it felt as if I had been touched by a piece of dry ice. My whole body suddenly went numb, as if it had received a giant dose of Novocaine. That was the last I remembered, until I opened my eyes and found myself in a large cavern of some sort. The immense size astounded me.
He was told that he was in their base in Antarctica, and they had been here on Earth for many years. Then he was taken down this long hall into this circular room, where he was introduced to the, quote, Exalted One, and for a short while he was allowed to ask questions. His first question was, how far does space extend? And he was told that it extends forever. And then he didn't waste any time, and he started asking religious questions.
You believe in God?
God is a fabrication of your people on Earth. You have strange races, and many languages are spoken, but it seems that all of your people have a desire to worship something.
What about Jesus Christ? Isn't he real?
The one you call Jesus Christ was a great believer in God, with miraculous attributes of great exaggeration. He could not save himself from death, and even his own race did not believe in him. Yet they worshipped the same God.
Do you not have a God on your planet? Do you worship anything?
We do not worship anything.
How do you account for the apparitions and ghosts that people claim to see?
When we came to your planet, we were surprised to learn that creatures live deep within cavernous cities, and they are able to make themselves invisible when they come to the surface. They are on the surface of your planet quite frequently, and they like to cause fright in order to cover their tracks and hide their identity.
Is there any possible way which you can convince me that this is not just a dream?
We can create an event that will prove this real. In a few days, we will send one of our small craft into your area, where it will eject a fireball, which will penetrate something of little value. We will not harm anybody, but you cannot tell anyone the truth behind this fireball until we are gone.
This was the last question that Bender was allowed to ask. The Exalted One vanished, and then Bender was escorted down a flight of stairs where these three beings formed a circle around him, and then he lost consciousness. Later, he woke up in his room. Up to this point in our report, most of the information comes directly from Bender's notes. But this next part, it actually was documented in history. Just after 9 p.m. on August 18, 1953, in New Haven, Connecticut, a strange blast ripped a hole in a sign on Middleton Avenue. The next morning, newspaper articles circulated through the town. Everyone was baffled as to what had caused the blast. Some witnesses came forward stating that they saw the blast as it happened. Other witnesses said that they saw a bright object tearing through the treetops right around the same time that this blast took place. Well, experts came in and they gave opinions as to what type of force would have been needed to cause this type of an event, and from what angle a projectile would had to have come in order to have created this type of damage. But in the end, no one really had a clue as to what had caused the blast. No one, that is, except, of course, for Bender. So, did otherworldly beings really make contact with Bender? Well, as I stated earlier, nearly this entire report comes to us solely from Bender. So, what do we know about him? Well, he was born June 16, 1921, and he died just a few years ago, actually, on March 29, 2016. He served in the Air Force during World War II, and then he worked his way up to an executive position in the Acme Shears Bridgeport plant, making scissors. He was a member of the United States Rocket Society, and many people consider him to have been a very sober person, down to earth, someone that's not really given to hallucinations. In his book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, Gray Barker wrote that when you sit down and talk to Bender, you can't help but be impressed, and you're almost overwhelmed by his dominant personality. His piercing eyes seem to look right through you, yet his personality carries a warmth of good humor, which makes any guest feel comfortable. Many of Bender's friends said that he was a very logical person, and he kept a tight rein on his imagination, and he wasn't one who was given to spreading lies. But, and I bet you knew there was a but coming, didn't you? The top people at the IFSB, his own organization, said that they believed that he was just making this whole thing up in order to attract new members. And although we can't know for certain if Bender's claims are true, we most definitely can take a look at this whole thing with a critical eye. For me, well, it just sounds too fantastical, and a lot of it just doesn't add up. Personally, I can't believe it. Of course, as with all of our reports, I want you to make up your own minds, and I want you to share what you think with us in the comments below. You know, Amy and I created this channel because we wanted a place where people could come together and discuss unexplainable topics like this. And when we see your comments, as long as they're given in love, we smile because it feels like the community is actually coming together. Thank you for watching.